Hello everybody and welcome to our presentation about penetration testing of Metasploit exploits using Kali Linux. This is Rana, Majdzadeh, and my group members are Ravilochan and Rishitha Reddy. The purpose of this project is to discuss about installing Kali Linux and Metasploit Linux on VirtualBox and pen testing of backdoor exploits like VSFTPD on real IRCD and brute force attack, also pen testing of DOS Solaris vulnerability and the reverse TCP exploit, and finally the prevention techniques for all these exploits. We had an Oracle VirtualBox and downloaded Kali Linux VirtualBox 64-bit OVA file from an offensive security website and installed it. The OVA file is an executable file that we can click and directly start it. We can see the login screen of Kali Linux with the credential of Kali as username and password. Kali Linux has the Metasploit framework which contains the exploits that we are going to use, and for installation of Metasploit Linux, which is available in many websites, we should download the zip file and after extracting, use the Metasploit VMDK file to install it on the VirtualBox. We need to create a virtual machine profile on VirtualBox and mount the downloaded VMDK file on it. By starting the machine, we can see the login screen like this and use the given username and password to log in. We should be aware that both of the virtual machines should be configured on host-only network adapter to prevent the communication from outside the host and act as a DHCP server to assign IP addresses to virtual machines. After the installation process, we started pen testing using one of the backdoor exploits known as VSFTPD, stands for Very Secure FTP Daemon. It's an FTP server for Unix-like systems, including Linux. So we used VSFTPD in Metasploit framework of Kali Linux to access the target machine, which is Metasploitable, that is an intentionally vulnerable Linux virtual machine. And Kali Linux is our attacker machine. We tried to make the access and create a directory on target machine using Kali Linux. For this issue, in this step, we should just keep the IP address of our target machine and the rest work is gonna be done on Kali Linux. First of all, we should find out which services, application names and versions, operation systems, and etc. are running on our target machine. So we used nmap command in Kali Linux to help us access to this information. From here, we got to know about the VSFTPD service present on Metasploit Linux. We're gonna start Metasploit framework on Kali Linux by the command of msf console. After starting and knowing about the VSFTPD that is available on Metasploit Linux, we searched about our vulnerability, which is VSFTPD, with the details of exploit along with the rank, which indicates the rate of success of exploit, that here is excellent. Now we should use the selected backdoor exploit and check its related options by the command of show options in order to see what configurations should be set to it. It's the time to fill out the option information such as target IP, which is our host and should be set by the IP address of our target machine, which is Metasploitable. We should also set the payload, which are simple scripts that the hackers utilize in order to interact with the hacked system. Now is the time to exploit or run our backdoor exploit. In this step, there is no guarantee that the exploit process is succeeded, and there are many factors to the success or failure of an exploitation. We can monitor the session being created, and if the user ID of the shell is 0, it means that we have the root access. We can see that the process was successful and finished, and the session is being created. By the command of whoami, we can check the username of the effective user ID and going to make a directory by helping the command of ls to show the contents of the directory and mkdir command to create a related directory. So now by checking the target machine, we can see that the mentioned directory is being created without being traced by using VSFTPD backdoor exploit. The next exploit is Unreal IRCD, which is an open source IRC daemon and is available for Unix-like operating systems. We are going to use it like VSFTPD to access the target machine and create a directory there. So at first, we should check and keep the IP address of our target and attacker machine. As we are performing pen testing of Unreal IRCD exploit, we should search for the exploit and check the open ports and services using nmap command on Metasploit framework. Starting the Metasploit and search for Unreal IRCD inside Kali Linux. selecting the exploit and check its details by info command. We should check the related options and set the target IP address and also set the payloads and finally run the exploit. Like previous exploit, we can access to the target machine and create a directory using our attacker machine and check the created file on the target machine. The next pen testing is brute force attack, which is a way of exploit by guessing username and passwords to gain access to administrative accounts that tries numerous password combinations to bypass the authentication process. We should start Metasploit and search for auxiliary/scanner/FTP to perform brute force attack. We should use the FTP login, which is the FTP authentication scanner. Then we should check the available options and set all the parameters related to it. We should set some options like rhost, rport, brute force speed, and some of the other options has already set. There is a user file that should be set by a text file, including usernames appearing one per line. We ran the exploit and saw the attempts being made, that some of them are successful and others are failed. It will take the usernames from the file path given, keeping the password same as the username, and does the brute force attack. We used one of the successful login and it's the username and password like user to access the target machine and the FTP server and transfer files to it. Now my group member Rishitha is going to continue with other exploits. Thank you.
Rana, as we move on to our next attack, which is pen testing of DOS Slowloris vulnerability. Denial of service attack is a cyber attack in which the attacker seeks to make a machine or a network resource unavailable to its intended users by disrupting services of a host connected to the internet. We will be using DOS Slowloris vulnerability present as auxiliary/dot/http/slowloris. Using this, we block web access to Metasploit Linux from Kali Linux. Here, Kali is the attacker machine and Metasploit will be the target machine. MSF console provides a command line interface to access and work with Metasploit framework. The console lets you do things like scan targets, exploit vulnerabilities, and collecting data. We start the Metasploit framework on Kali Linux by giving MSF console and searching for DOS Slowloris. As we can see, DOS vulnerability is found, and in this case, it is an auxiliary module instead of an exploit module. As a next step, we check the available options under the auxiliary and set the rhost with target IP address. Rhost is nothing but, in Metasploit, it refers to the IP address of a target host. As our next step, we execute the auxiliary module and check if the session is created or not. And we can verify the success of DOS attack by accessing the target machine's HTTP service through web browser, and this should be available. As you all can see that it is not working, so we can say that it's not available. Now we can stop the DOS attack by issuing Ctrl+C in MSF control. The HTTP server will be available as seen. Our next exploit is setting up reverse TCP shell to Windows XP and observing keystrokes. In this setup, Metasploit Linux is the attacker machine and Windows XP is the victim machine. Both of them are installed on Oracle VirtualBox. This can also be carried out in other Windows versions. We are going to use multi-handler exploit and attack Windows XP machine to observe the keystrokes. We set up reverse TCP shell using command line MSF Venom. This command can be used for generating payloads to be used in many locations and offers a variety of output options. We copy and paste the shell.exe file from Kali Linux to Windows XP machine. Shell.exe executable file is produced as the output of MSF Venom. As the next step, we run multi-handler exploit on Metasploit framework on Kali Linux. Multi-handler is a step that handles exploits launched outside of the framework. We configure the options required by the multi-handler exploit. As the next step, we set the payloads as Windows/metapreter/reverse_TCP and lhost with the IP address of Kali Linux machine. Lhost is the IP address of attacking Kali Linux machine. The shell.exe file inside Windows XP machine has to be executed, and then we run the exploit from Kali Linux. Reverse TCP is established between Kali Linux and Windows XP machine now. Meterpreter special opens up in the Metasploit framework of Kali Linux. It will show the different command options available on Windows machine. Among those options, we choose keyscan option to observe keystrokes performed inside the Windows XP. Here we are exploring the options available on Windows XP machine by typing help in Meterpreter section, and then we choose the keyscan options available under interference commands. Here we use the keyscan_star to observe the keystrokes on Windows XP machine. Meanwhile, we create a text document file inside the Windows XP with dummy credentials. As you all can see here, these are the dummy credentials. Use keyscan_dump to fetch the keystrokes captured. As we can see, retrieve the required sensitive information. We will now dump the keystrokes captured and extract information from it. We can use the extracted information to our advantage. Therefore, we were able to record keystrokes from Kali Linux without Windows XP machine knowing it. We performed an extra attack attempt by capturing live screen of Windows XP machine discreetly from Kali Linux. Thank you. The prevention techniques are explained by my teammate Ravilochan.
Thank you, Rishitha. Now I'll be explaining the prevention techniques for the attacks carried out. So in general, exploits and attacks can be prevented by blocking open ports, using network monitoring tools, by using antivirus software, having a strong passwords, and keeping systems up to date. So strategies to prevent backdoor exploits are by using advanced antivirus. These advanced antivirus should be installed on computer systems and networks to both detect and prevent backdoor attacks. Antivirus software should also have the firewall feature to allow only authorized users. By using network monitoring tool. The network monitoring tools can help detect suspicious activities such as unauthorized uploads and downloads and the remote access happening on the system to alter the settings and of systems and network and other activities that will affect the integrity of systems and networks. By changing default passwords. New employees when they join the company they will be assigned default passwords for systems and tools assigned to them. So once they start working they have to change them. And the IT administration also plays an important role in preventing the backdoor. So the steps that can be taken by the IT are using multiple vendor softwares to limit the risk of common backdoors across different systems, installing open source software, checking software integrity signatures, scanning known backdoor, and monitoring network for suspicious communications. Next, coming to brute force attack. Signs of brute force attack are many unsuccessful login attempts by same IP address or different IP addresses forcibly logging into same account in a short time period repeatedly. The strategies to prevent brute force attack are limiting login attempts. As we know, brute force attack mainly relies on attempting multiple passwords and usernames. So by restricting the login attempts to a small amount per user, attackers won't be able to try more than a few passwords. Using strong passwords. Strong passwords, which are unique and hard to guess, having a length of 10 characters, makes it difficult for the attacker to guess. Then limiting the access using IP table rules. So we can whitelist the IP addresses and create rules to allow access according to the security rules. Next, by making root users inaccessible via SSH. Then using CAPTCHA while logging in. CAPTCHA will basically prevent the bots from logging in, which is very good. Using two-factor authentication. Next, coming to the strategies to prevent denial of service attack. So the first step that can be taken is developing a denial of service response plan. So depending on the infrastructure of the company, denial of service response plan should be developed indicating the list of assets the company has, responsibilities of key employees in the company during attack, escalation procedures, and internal and external contacts to be notified. Next, by securing network infrastructure. The network infrastructure generally includes firewalls, VPN, anti-spam, content filtering, and load balancing, network monitoring, and other mechanisms to prevent DOS attack from happening. Next, by practicing basic security techniques. Security techniques such as changing passwords regularly, anti-phishing methods, securing firewalls, and allowing only little outside traffic helps in preventing the denial of service attack. Test running the DOS attacks. So we can simulate the DOS attack in our own network to test the prevention methods if they are working fine. Leveraging the cloud. Outsourcing the DOS prevention to cloud-based service providers will avoid direct impact on company servers. Next, coming to strategies to prevent reverse TCP shell and key logging are by restricting outsiders from physical access into the system, installing client-based firewalls, avoid downloading email attachments from the unknown sources and executing them, installing a password manager. So password manager basically stores all the passwords in an encrypted file which is accessible by a single secure password. By keeping systems up to date, the latest defense mechanisms are applied. By using automatic form filler programs, it avoids typing details in web browsers, but one has to make sure that the form fillers are encrypted, the passwords in it basically. Next, using the one-time passwords. The OTPs act as a two-factor authentication when any intruder tries to break in. So that would be all for the prevention. Thank you for watching the presentation.